What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. All right, so this is a requested video from one of my subscribers that wanted me to do a comparison between Stan Van Gundy and George Karl as head coaches. Now, in my opinion, neither one of these guys are what I would call all-time great coaches, but they did have some level of success. I would say that they were above average coaches, but not necessarily all-time great coaches. Which one was better? Well, it depends on, I guess, how you look at it, but instinctively, I would go with George Karl. All right? Now, as far as Stan Van Gundy is concerned, Stan Van Gundy started off as a collegiate coach. In 1995, he became an assistant to Pat Riley in Miami. If I remember correctly, he succeeded Pat Riley as head coach back in 2003, but he was fired as the head coach of the Miami Heat shortly into the 2005-2006 season by Pat Riley, and Pat Riley came from the front office and went back to the sidelines and eventually led that Heat team to a championship. A couple years later on, Stan Van Gundy became the head coach of Orlando Magic. And then in 2008-2009, which I think is Stan Van Gundy's best season as a head coach, he led that team to a 59-23 record and all the way to the NBA Finals under the peak performance of Dwight Howard, but ultimately lost in the finals 4-1. Stan Van Gundy also coached the Detroit Pistons for a 4-year span, and he coached, his last coaching gig was in New Orleans with the Pelicans, 2020-21. Since then, I believe Stan Van Gundy has become a broadcast analyst, and a pretty decent one in my opinion. As far as his NBA coaching record is concerned, Stan Van Gundy won 554 games, lost 425 for a win percentage of .566. His playoff win percentage, 48 victories, 43 defeats, for a .527 win percentage. Like I said, he went to one NBA Finals where he lost to Lakers in 5. Stan Van Gundy appeared in the conference finals altogether, I believe 3 different times. In 2005, they lost to the Detroit Pistons. I don't remember the spread, but lost to the Detroit Pistons in 2005. And they lost the very next year after they went to the finals, lost to Lakers. They went to the conference finals, losing to the Boston Celtics. I think they lost to the Boston Celtics in 6, if memory serves me correctly. I think it was 6 in 2010. They lost to the Boston Celtics. Stan Van Gundy missed the playoffs. I'm not counting the year that he resigned as head coach. I thought he was fired by Van Gundy. Fired by Pat Riley, but it says here he resigned. But anyway, not counting that year, Stan Van Gundy missed the playoffs 4 times, lost in the first round 3 times, lost in the semifinals twice, reached the conference finals 3 times, and reached the NBA finals once. As far as his coaching accolades are concerned, 2 times he was the All-Star Game head coach, 2005 and 2010. So that is Stan Van Gundy as an NBA coach. Now George Karl, not one of my favorite persons, but I'm trying to be fair here. George Karl, of course, I think he coached 22 years in the NBA. Years in the NBA. Now, his first coaching gig came in the mid-'80s for the Cleveland Cavaliers. I think I can't remember who he succeeded. I cannot remember who he succeeded. But he coached 84 and 85. 85, 86 for the Cleveland Cavaliers. Then he coached for 2 years for the Golden State Warriors. Probably his most memorable stint is his stint with the Seattle Supersonics, the now defunct Seattle Supersonics. He coached them from 1991 to 1998. And of course, he went to the NBA Finals back in 1996, losing 4-2 to the Chicago Bulls. And then George Karl had a stint with the Milwaukee Bucks that lasted, I believe, about 5 seasons. Then he went to Denver and coached for about 8 years. And then he had, George Karl, after a season off, a 2-year stint as the coach of the Sacramento Kings. And that's it as far as his coaching career. He had a much longer coaching career than Stan Van Gundy. He won 1,175 games, lost 824 for a win percentage of .588. Unfortunately, what really hurts George Karl is his postseason. As successful as his regular seasons have been, his postseason have not been that successful. He has a record of 80-105 as a head coach in the postseason, which is only a .432 win percentage. So he has not had success in the postseason. Stan Van Gundy did, relative to the period of time that he coached, had success, some success in the postseason. George Karl went to the NBA Finals once, but he lost to the Chicago Bulls. Stan Van Gundy lost in the conference finals once, I believe, and that was in 2001. No, lost twice. I take that back. He lost twice in the conference finals. Once in 2001 against the Sixers, which, albeit it was a somewhat disputed result, and also lost in 2009 to the Los Angeles Lakers in the conference finals. Lost in the semifinals in his career once, twice, 3, 4 different times he lost in the conference finals. And he lost in the first round a multitude of times, George Karl. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. 13 times. 13 times. George Karl lost in the first round, and he missed the playoffs altogether. I believe 3 times. 1988. 1986, 1988, 2002, 2015, 16. So 5 times. 5 times he missed the playoffs completely. And George Karl's accolades as a head coach is that he is in the Basketball Hall of Fame as a coach. He was Coach of the Year 2012, 2013. 4 times NBA All-Star Game head coach. 1994, 96, 98, and 2010. And I'm only talking about the NBA stuff. So, oh man, who was better? You know, Stan Van Gundy's postseason win percentage means something. However, I could argue that many of those runs, Stan Van Gundy may have had an easier team to coach with, or he was coaching on a team that didn't have as much competition as compared to George Karl. You can make that argument. I mean, look at the accolades, look at the wins, the win percentage. Excuse me. You look at all of that. Even though I know that George Karl was not liked by a lot of players, you can make an argument that George Karl got outcoached a lot. You can say the same thing for Stan Van Gundy in certain series. Although I kind of think that when you really look at the teams that Van Gundy coached, he did pretty good. He didn't coach on any super. He didn't coach any super teams. George Karl coached some really good teams, man. That Sonic team in '96 won 64 games. Let's see something. As far as losing records in the regular season, George Karl had 1, 2, 3. Um, 4, 5, 6. No, 4, 5. So 5 times in his 22-year career, George Karl coached a team with a losing record. To be honest with you, I think that Stan Van Gundy got more out of his teams than George Karl did. I just have to say it. I think, my initial assessment was I was going to go with George Karl, but considering some of the players that George Karl coached, Allen Iverson, Carmelo Anthony, Chauncey Billups, Gary Payton, Sean Kemp, Ray Allen, who else? Vin Baker, Glenn Big Dog Robinson. Sleepy Floyd, Purvis Short. Man, yeah. At the end of the day, I kind of got to go with Stan Van Gundy, man. Even though Stan Van Gundy did not coach as long, he did not coach as long as George Karl. I just think he got more out of the players and the teams that he had compared to George Karl. Like, for him to win 56.6% of his games and to win 53+ % of his playoff games when you're coaching teams like the Pelicans, the Magic, these fringe teams. There's always a Stan Van Gundy type. There's always a Stan Van Gundy or, some coach like that that's always overachieving with mediocre talent because he kind of understands X's and O's more than some other guys. Some coaches are very good at making adjustments on the fly, and other coaches are not. So, just my opinion. Now, I think I have to do a reversal and go with Stan Van Gundy. But tell me what you guys think.